What it's like for residents really depends on where you are. So let me paint you a picture of what it's like here. We're on the Atlantic side of the state of Florida. This is where the primary damage was done by tornadoes. So those tornadoes that touched down, they kind of came through in the wake of Hurricane Milton, and they swept through communities here. And this is actually where a lot of the loss of life occurred. We actually got into one of the communities, a place called Spanish Lakes, just a little farther than about a half an hour from where we are right now. And we spoke to some residents there, one of which actually uncovered his neighbors from the rubble. Have a listen to Hank Pierce's story.
Came from over there, right over the house this way, and kept going that way. That's what all those other houses.
Straight past here.
Yeah, and I found 3 people dead over there. As soon as it went, I went outside and I started looking for people. And
did you know them? Or?
Yeah, they were my neighbors. We all know each other here. It's a great community.
So, Linda, just a heartbreaking tale there. And as people in this area start picking up the pieces and rebuilding their lives, a lot of them asking the same questions that Hank's going to be asking, which is, where am I going to be hanging my hat? Where am I going to be staying? We're outside of a resource center that's open today here in Fort Pierce, which is trying to help connect people with those services. We saw a Red Cross vehicle just go by a second ago. So help is on the way at places like this right across the state.
And on the Gulf side of the Florida coast, where Milton actually made landfall, what's it like on that side of things?
Sure, a very, very different situation, at least as far as the impact on human lives. The deaths were really focused here on the East Coast, but a lot of the damage caused by Milton, the storm surge, the rain and stuff like that, that really hit the Gulf side much, much harder. But even though the damage is really quite striking, we're hearing estimates of maybe $50 billion in insured damages. As people start to return home, there's a sense that it could have been even worse. Have a listen to this resident from Siesta Key as they get back to their home.
Really, we're expecting to see the whole place just gone, but to come home and also find 4 of the units completely missing their roofs wasn't exactly pleasant either. But at least our home is still standing.
So they have a home to return to. That's good news. Some struggles, though, for people that even weren't directly impacted by the hurricane or the tornadoes in this state. Electricity out, as you mentioned in the introduction there, for well over 1 million, almost 2 million people, and some gas shortages in places across the state. You heard the governor address that earlier as well. President Joe Biden will be in the state tomorrow. He's offering federal assistance, and we'll wait to hear details on that when he arrives tomorrow, Linda.
CBC's Aaron Collins in Fort Pierce, Florida. Well, nonprofit organizations are helping out with Hurricane Milton recovery. Feeding Tampa Bay is one of the groups giving out food today. For more on this, I spoke with Thomas Mantz, the president and CEO of Feeding Tampa Bay, and I asked him about the demand for food that he's seeing on the ground.
So I'm in St. Petersburg, the beach of St. Petersburg, which is one of the hardest hit areas by Helene and Milton. As I drove out here, I went past house after house and business after business with all of their possessions on their driveways, which is a sobering moment to think all of these things that someone collected, cared about, are ruined post-storm. And we've had the double whammy of 2 in a row. So we're trying to make sure that people have the essentials over my shoulder. We're about to start a distribution of food into the community so folks can get some of the essentials. But across all of our communities that we serve, folks have been hit pretty hard by both of these storms.
Yeah, what's that been like for people, and what kind of stories are you hearing from them about the challenges that they're facing?
I think there are 2 things that everybody faces in a story. One, in a storm. One is it is really difficult, the stress, the tension. Schools, businesses, homes, all have been impacted by the storms. Folks are having trouble finding food and gas and some of the basic resources. Many families don't have power yet. And so that really takes an emotional and mental toll on families. On top of that, the stress of trying to make sure you feed your family, that you have basic resources for your family, it's really, really difficult for folks right now. We're all hopeful that it'll get better soon. We've had some sunny skies. You can see those behind me, but it's been a really difficult 3 weeks. Think about that. We've not had a break in 3 weeks, and there's a lot more to come in terms of recovery.
And behind you, we can see some of the work that you're actually actively doing, taking a break to talk to us. But I can imagine that this work has been challenging for you as well, as we also see pictures of long lineups for access to just gasoline. And we heard the governor say that they're working on trying to make that easier for people. So many people without power as well. How much of a challenge has it been for your crews that are on the ground to do the work that they're trying to do right now?
It's interesting. It's a great question because we're trying to get into communities that have been hardest hit. So if you're on surface roads as opposed to highways, there are trees down, power lines down. Our teams are having to navigate around that, trying to make sure we get into areas that have been flooded out or blown over by the storm. We had two very different events in some ways. We had a flooding event with Helene, and we had a wind event and water event with Milton. So these are two very different challenges. Even today in some of our areas where there are rivers, those waters are still rising today, 3 days after the storm, and families are getting flooded out even today. So it's been quite a challenge, and it will be a challenge. I think for viewers to understand, folks won't be better tomorrow. It's going to take a while for a community to recover, our communities to recover. And so for an organization like Feeding Tampa Bay, we'll be here, but it's a big lift and a long lift.
And I'm wondering about the kind of help that you're getting with that lift. Before Milton hit, after Helene, we heard the White House say that FEMA had, I think it was 20 million meals, 40 million liters of water ready to go to address the impact of these two storms. Have you seen that help get to the people who need it?
I think, yes. I think one of the things that happens here in the United States is there are two very different groups that try and make sure families are okay. One is we do have federal and state resources that come into our area. But number two, a lot of what happens in our communities are done by our communities. All the folks you see over my shoulders are volunteers. We're a charitably based organization, so most of our funds come from the community. So one of the things we love about what we do and where we live is that when it is a crisis, folks step in to make sure that we're okay.
And there must be a level of fatigue that your teams are dealing with as well. Physical fatigue, having dealt with Helene and now Milton, but also emotional fatigue. As you say, a lot of them struggling in their own personal situations as well. How is everybody doing?
It's again, a good question. A lot of our team members don't have power either. And they're still coming to work and still going out into the community to make sure folks are okay. The word hero gets tossed around a lot. I would say that my teammates are heroes. They're out making sure today and every other day that the community is okay, even when their own circumstances could be challenging. But I think we're really lucky to do what we do. We're lucky to live where we live. And it's a great group of folks around us here in Tampa Bay.
That is Thomas Mantz, the president and CEO of Feeding Tampa Bay.